Amanda and I had what others called the perfect marriage. She was everything I could ever want. Beautiful, kind, and ambitious. Her energy lit up every room she walked into, and I often caught myself marveling at how lucky I was to have her in my life. We had been married for 3 years, together for 5, and during that time, I convinced myself we were unshakable. Friends envied us, co-workers admired us, and even strangers commented on how well we fit together. I basked in the illusion, not realizing how fragile it really was. I worked hard to build a life for us, pouring countless hours into my career to ensure we never lacked comfort. Amanda worked part-time at an art gallery, pursuing her passion for creativity. I encouraged her to follow her dreams, even if it didn't bring in much income. To me, her happiness was worth more than anything money could buy. Life felt stable, solid, and secure. But, as I'd come to learn, the veneer of perfection can hide cracks too deep to repair. The first cracks appeared so faintly, I dismissed them as nothing. Amanda began staying later at work, citing gallery events and last-minute tasks. I didn't think much of it at first. She had always loved her job, and I wanted to support her ambition. But as weeks turned into months, I couldn't ignore the shift in her demeanor. She seemed distracted, distant in a way that was hard to put into words. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly between us now felt stilted and forced. Her phone became another subtle sign. Amanda had always been casual with it, leaving it on counters or tucked into her purse. Now it was constantly in her hand or face down on the table. When it buzzed, she'd glance at it quickly and slide it away, as if shielding something from view. I told myself it was nothing, that everyone has a right to privacy. Still, a quiet unease began to settle in the back of my mind, whispering doubts I wasn't ready to confront. One night, she came home later than usual, her excuse vague and hurried. As she walked past me, I caught a whiff of cologne, not mine. It wasn't overpowering, but it was there, clinging to her like a ghost. I asked her how her day had gone, and she gave me a rushed, rehearsed answer before disappearing into the shower. Her energy felt different that night, like she was carrying a secret she couldn't wait to hide. I sat in the living room, replaying her words, her tone, her actions. Something was wrong, but I didn't know what. I tried to push the thought away, convincing myself it was paranoia. After all, Amanda loved me. We had built a life together, one filled with shared dreams and deep trust, or so I thought. But no matter how hard I tried to silence it, the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. It was like a splinter lodged in my mind, small but impossible to ignore. I decided I needed to pay closer attention, to look for anything that might confirm or dispel my suspicions. The first real clue came late one evening. Amanda had left her phone on the nightstand while she showered, something she rarely did anymore. It buzzed with a message from someone named Jake. The preview seemed innocent, a question about seeing her at the gallery, but it was the familiarity of the tone that caught my attention. Who was Jake? And why did his message feel so personal? I didn't open it. Instead, I stared at the screen until the notification faded, the unease in my chest growing heavier. I told myself there could be a logical explanation. Maybe Jake was a co-worker or a client. But the name stayed with me, burrowing into my thoughts like a parasite. I decided to let it go for the time being, hoping it was nothing. Yet a part of me knew better. It was the first crack I couldn't ignore, the first sign that my perfect marriage might not be as perfect as I had believed. Over the following weeks, I started noticing patterns. Amanda mentioned Jake's name more frequently, always in passing, as though trying to make it sound casual. He was a co-worker, she said, someone she worked with on gallery events. Her explanations were always brief, lacking the usual excitement she had when talking about her job. At the same time, her late nights became more common. She often came home hours later than she'd promised, offering vague excuses about last-minute meetings or team drinks. I began to connect the dots, though I desperately wanted to believe they led nowhere. The shift in her behavior, the constant presence of Jake's name, the growing distance between us, it all felt too coincidental. Still, I kept my suspicions to myself. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, to believe that the woman I loved couldn't betray me. But as the days turned into weeks, that belief became harder to hold on to. The cracks in our marriage were growing, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. The void between us grew wider with each passing day. Amanda became a stranger in our home, her laughter a rare sound, her touch a fleeting memory. Conversations felt like a chore, as if she were going through the motions out of obligation rather than genuine connection. I tried to bridge the gap, suggesting date nights or small getaways, but she always had an excuse. Work, exhaustion, something pressing that couldn't wait. The void wasn't just emotional. Our physical intimacy, once a cornerstone of our relationship, had all but disappeared. When I reached for her, she pulled away, claiming she was too tired or not in the mood. The rejection stung, leaving me feeling isolated and unwanted in my own marriage. I told myself it was just a phase, a temporary rough patch we could overcome. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something was pulling her away from me, and I feared I was already too late to stop it. One evening, after Amanda came home late for the fourth time that week, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The words spilled out before I could stop them. I asked her about Jake, about the late nights, about the growing distance between us. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't get defensive or angry. Instead, she looked startled, like a deer caught in headlights. She stumbled over her words, insisting that Jake was just a friend, that the late nights were for work, that I was imagining things. Her tears came next, a flood of emotion that left me confused and torn. She begged me to trust her, to believe that nothing was going on. I wanted to believe her. I wanted so desperately for her words to be true. But the doubt in my heart had already taken root, and no amount of pleading could erase the unease that had been building for months. For a few weeks, things seemed to settle. Amanda made an effort to be more present, to spend time with me, to rekindle what had felt so distant. She left her phone out in the open, talked more about her day, and even suggested we take a weekend trip to the mountains. It felt like the old Amanda was returning, the woman I had fallen in love with. But the peace was fragile, a thin layer of ice over a turbulent sea. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Her gestures, though thoughtful, felt forced, like she was trying too hard to convince me, and herself, that everything was fine. I accepted her efforts, but the doubt lingered, a shadow that refused to be banished. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Amanda had gone to the store, leaving her laptop open on the kitchen table. I hadn't meant to snoop, but when a notification popped up in the corner of the screen, my curiosity got the better of me. It was an email from Jake, short but unmistakably intimate. I opened it, my hands trembling. The messages between them were devastating. They spoke of stolen moments, secret meetings, and a connection that had clearly been going on for months. My chest tightened as I scrolled through the emails, each word a dagger to my heart. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had vowed to love and cherish, had betrayed me in the most profound way. When Amanda came home, I confronted her with the emails. She didn't deny it. She broke down, sobbing and apologizing, insisting it had been a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that she still loved me. Her words felt hollow, like an echo in an empty room. I couldn't speak. The pain in my chest was suffocating, a weight that threatened to crush me. I turned and walked out of the house, needing space, air, anything to escape the storm raging inside me. Trust, once broken, is impossible to piece back together, and in that moment, I felt like a stranger in my own life. The days that followed were agonizing. Amanda begged me to give her another chance, to let her prove that she could change, that she could earn back my trust. Friends and family, unaware of the full extent of what had happened, urged me to forgive her, to work through it. But forgiveness felt impossible. I spent hours agonizing over what to do. Part of me wanted to walk away, to end the marriage and start over. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the love we had shared, wanted to believe she could change. In the end, I made the choice I thought was right. I told her I would give her one more chance, but only if she ended all contact with Jake and committed fully to rebuilding our marriage. Amanda promised she would cut Jake out of her life. She deleted his number, blocked him on social media, and swore she would never see him again. She threw herself into repairing our relationship, planning date nights, writing heartfelt notes, and making an effort to be present in a way she hadn't been in months. For a while, it seemed to work. We laughed again, shared meals, and talked late into the night like we used to. The walls between us began to crumble, and I started to believe that we might actually be able to move forward. But even as I tried to trust her again, a part of me remained guarded, unwilling to fully let down my defenses. A few months later, the cracks began to reappear. Amanda became distant again, her late nights at the gallery returning without explanation. She dismissed my questions with vague excuses, her tone impatient, as if I were the one creating problems. The phone, once left casually on the counter, was now glued to her hand again. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I needed to trust her if our marriage was going to survive. But the doubt in my heart wouldn't go away. It whispered to me in the quiet moments, urging me to look closer, to dig deeper, to find the truth I was so afraid to uncover. One night, unable to sleep, I checked her phone while she was in the shower. The messages were back. Jake's name appeared again, along with the same intimacy, the same lies, the same betrayal. My chest burned with anger and heartbreak as I realized she had never stopped. She had simply become better at hiding it. This second betrayal hit harder than the first. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the trust one had given her, the effort I had made to rebuild our marriage, and the realization that she had thrown it all away. The woman I had loved, the woman I had fought to forgive, had betrayed me again, and this time I knew there was no going back. When I found those messages on her phone, something inside me shattered. It wasn't the fiery anger of the first betrayal or the confused sorrow of a broken man desperate for answers. This time, it was a cold, hollow void that swept through me, draining every ounce of hope I had left. Amanda had promised to cut Jake out of her life. She had begged for forgiveness, cried into my chest, and written me letters about how much she loved me. And yet, here it was, proof that her words had been nothing more than lies. I stared at the screen, scrolling through the messages, each one a stab to my already battered heart. They talked about their meetings, their plans, their feelings for each other as if I didn't exist. She hadn't just betrayed me again. She had built a secret life around her lies, weaving Jake into the fabric of her existence while stringing me along with false promises of change. It wasn't just infidelity anymore. It was cruelty. I put the phone down, unable to read another word. My mind raced as I tried to process what I had just seen. The months of therapy, the late-night conversations, the efforts to rebuild our life together. It had all been for nothing. She hadn't changed. She hadn't even tried. I felt like a fool for believing her, for allowing myself to hope that we could move past the first betrayal. Now, there was no hope left. I heard the water shut off in the bathroom, her soft hum carrying through the door as she wrapped herself in a towel. My stomach turned. How could she be so casual, so unbothered, knowing what she was doing behind my back? How could she come home to me, kiss me, and sleep beside me, all while planning her next meeting with him? I walked out of the room, unable to face her. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. My thoughts swirled in chaotic circles, replaying every moment of our relationship with a bitter new perspective. Every memory of happiness, every moment of love, now felt tainted, polluted by her betrayal. I wanted to confront her right then, to unleash the storm of emotions inside me, but I knew it wouldn't matter. She would deny it at first, then cry, then beg for another chance, and I couldn't bear to hear her lies again. I spent hours thinking about what to do. Divorce felt like the obvious choice, but it wasn't enough. Not after everything I had endured. I didn't want to walk away quietly, leaving her free to live her life with Jake as if I had been nothing more than an obstacle in her way. I wanted her to feel the pain she had caused me, to understand the depth of the damage she had done. I wanted her world to crumble the way mine had. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I made my decision. This time, I wouldn't let her manipulate me. I wouldn't let her tears sway me or her apologies weakened my resolve. I would take control of the situation, but not in the way she might expect. If she thought she could destroy me and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. In the days that followed, I began to plan. Amanda continued her charade, acting as if nothing had changed, completely unaware of what I knew. I played along, keeping my emotions in check, even managing a smile or two when she tried to be affectionate. But inside, I was calculating my next move. The first step was financial. I opened a new bank account in my name only and began quietly transferring money into it, careful not to raise any suspicion. I also contacted a lawyer, explaining the situation and asking for advice on how to proceed. She was sympathetic but professional, walking me through my options and ensuring I would be protected if things escalated. Next, I gathered evidence. I printed out the messages from her phone, saved screenshots, and documented every instance of her late nights and suspicious behavior. I knew that if I wanted to expose her, I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't talk her way out of. It was painful, combing through the evidence of her betrayal, but it also gave me a strange sense of control. I began to think about how to confront her. Part of me wanted to explode in anger, to lay everything out in front of her and watch her squirm. But another part of me wanted something more calculated, something that would truly make her understand the consequences of her actions. I wasn't just planning to end our marriage. I was planning to dismantle the life she had built on lies. A week later, the opportunity presented itself. Amanda had planned another late night at the gallery, something about an artist reception, though I didn't bother to pretend I believed her. As soon as she left, I set the stage. I arranged the evidence neatly on the dining room table, printed emails, screenshots, and even a few photos I had found of her and Jake together. I wanted her to see it all at once, to feel the weight of her deceit in full. When she came home, she looked surprised to find me sitting at the table. I gestured for her to join me, and she hesitated before sitting down. The silence was heavy as I pushed the stack of evidence toward her. I told her to look at it, to take her time and read every word. Her face went pale as she flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but I cut her off. I told her I didn't want to hear her excuses, that her actions had spoken louder than any apology ever could. I laid out everything I had learned, every lie she had told, every moment she had stolen from me. By the time I finished, she was in tears, her head in her hands. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, no sadness. Just a hollow emptiness where my love for her had once been. I told her I was done, that I would be filing for divorce, and that she could take her lies and her lover and leave. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The storm inside me had quieted, replaced by the clarity of knowing exactly what I needed to do. After our confrontation, Amanda retreated to the guest room without a word. I sat at the table long after she had left, staring at the evidence scattered across its surface. For months, I had been consumed by doubt and pain, but now, in the aftermath, I felt empty. The anger and sadness I had anticipated weren't there. In their place was a quiet numbness, a stark realization that the life I thought we had built was already gone. That night, I barely slept. The house felt foreign, like I was wandering through someone else's memories. Every photo on the walls, every piece of furniture we had chosen together, now felt tainted. I had spent so long trying to preserve what we had, but I finally understood that it was beyond saving. The foundation had cracked, and no amount of effort could repair it. By morning, Amanda hadn't emerged from the guest room. I could hear her moving around, her steps tentative, almost as though she was afraid to face me. I didn't seek her out. Whatever words she might have had to offer, I wasn't interested in hearing them. For the first time, I was truly ready to move forward without her. Over the next few days, I focused on preparing for the inevitable fallout. The lawyer I had consulted assured me that the evidence I had gathered would put me in a strong position during the divorce proceedings. She advised me to remain calm and measured, to avoid giving Amanda any ammunition she could use against me. I took her advice to heart, staying out of Amanda's way and keeping our interactions brief and civil. Amanda, for her part, seemed lost. She made a few feeble attempts to apologize, but her words lacked conviction. I could tell she didn't fully grasp the depth of the damage she had done, or perhaps she did, and it was too much for her to face. Either way, her efforts to repair the relationship felt hollow, like she was going through the motions without any real hope of redemption. Meanwhile, I continued to lay the groundwork for my next steps. I began separating my finances, closing joint accounts, and transferring my assets into accounts she couldn't access. I contacted a realtor to discuss selling the house, knowing I couldn't stay there after everything that had happened. Every decision felt like a small step toward reclaiming my life, toward building something new out of the ruins Amanda had left behind. Just as I thought I had regained control, Amanda blindsided me. One evening, she announced that she wasn't going to contest the divorce. She said she wanted to make things as painless as possible, that she understood what she had done and didn't want to drag things out. Her words caught me off guard. For months, I had braced myself for a battle, for tearful pleas or manipulative tactics. Her sudden capitulation felt almost anticlimactic. But as the days went on, I began to suspect there was more to her compliance than met the eye. She started going out more frequently, her late nights returning without explanation. At first, I thought she was meeting Jake, but something about her behavior didn't add up. She seemed guarded, almost secretive, in a way that felt different from before. My suspicions were confirmed when I received an email from one of her co-workers at the gallery. The message was brief but pointed. "I thought you should know Amanda's been seeing someone new. It's not Jake." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Even after everything, even with divorce proceedings underway, she was still lying, still betraying me. The realization that Amanda had moved on so quickly, before we had even finalized our separation, was devastating. It wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was the casual disregard for the life we had built together, the complete lack of respect for the pain she had already caused. She hadn't just replaced me. She had erased me, as though I had never mattered at all. I confronted her that night, unable to hold back the storm of emotions any longer. She didn't deny it. Instead, she shrugged, her expression one of resignation rather than remorse. She said she didn't see the point in pretending anymore, that she had already accepted our marriage was over. Her indifference was like a knife to my chest, twisting deeper with every word. In that moment, I realized the full extent of her betrayal. It wasn't just about Jake or the new man she had replaced him with. It was about the choices she had made, the lies she had told, and the person she had become. The woman I had loved, the woman I had married, was gone, and in her place was a stranger I could barely recognize. That night, something inside me shifted. The anger and sadness that had consumed me for months gave way to a steely resolve. I had spent so much time trying to understand Amanda's actions, trying to salvage what was left of our marriage, trying to make sense of the senseless. But now, I saw the truth with startling clarity. Amanda wasn't worth my pain, my time, or my forgiveness. I resolved to move forward, not as a victim, but as a man determined to rebuild his life. I finalized my plans to sell the house, ensuring I would walk away with the majority of the proceeds. I accelerated the divorce proceedings, cutting through the red tape as quickly as possible. And most importantly, I began focusing on myself. For too long, I had let Amanda's betrayal define me. I had let it consume my thoughts, dictate my actions, and overshadow every other aspect of my life. But now, I was ready to take back control. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: it wouldn't include her. In the weeks that followed, I began the process of letting go. It wasn't easy. Every corner of the house held memories of Amanda, reminders of the life we had shared. Packing up our belongings was like sifting through the wreckage of a dream. Each box, a painful reminder of what had been lost. But with every item I packed, with every memory I tucked away, I felt a little lighter. I started therapy, something I had resisted for months. Talking to someone about my pain, my anger, my grief, was like opening a valve on a pressure cooker. Slowly but surely, the weight began to lift. I learned to separate Amanda's choices from my own worth, to see her betrayal as a reflection of her flaws rather than my failures. I also began reconnecting with friends and family, people I had unintentionally pushed away during the darkest moments of my marriage. Their support was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. With their help, I started to see the future not as an empty void, but as a blank canvas, full of possibilities I hadn't yet imagined. The day Amanda moved out was strangely anticlimactic. The movers came early, loading her boxes into a truck with mechanical efficiency. Amanda hovered nearby, directing them with clipped instructions, her face an unreadable mask. I stayed in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and trying not to watch. I thought I would feel anger, sadness, or maybe even relief. Instead, there was just a hollow silence, the kind that settles in after the storm has passed. She paused before leaving, standing in the doorway, as though she wanted to say something. I waited, giving her the chance, but she simply looked at me, her expression caught somewhere between guilt and resignation. Then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. I walked through the house, now stripped of her presence. The bedroom was half empty, her side of the closet barren, except for a few forgotten hangers. In the bathroom, the counter once cluttered with her makeup and perfume was now stark and clean. The house felt alien, like a shell of what it once was. In the days that followed, I threw myself into the task of starting over. I sold the house, choosing to downsize to a smaller apartment in the city. The act of leaving behind the space we had shared was bittersweet, but it also felt necessary. I needed a fresh start, a place where I could begin rebuilding without the weight of old memories pressing down on me. Moving into the new apartment was a strange mix of liberating and lonely. The blank walls and empty rooms felt like a clean slate, but they also underscored just how much I had lost. I spent the first few nights unpacking, trying to make the space feel like home. I hung new artwork, rearranged the furniture, and threw out anything that reminded me of Amanda. It was slow work, but with every box I unpacked, I felt a little more settled, a little more like myself. Therapy became my lifeline during this time. My therapist, a calm and insightful woman named Dr. Haynes, helped me untangle the mess of emotions I had been carrying. She challenged me to confront the anger and pain I had tried so hard to suppress, to stop blaming myself for Amanda's choices. One session, she asked me a question that stopped me cold. If Amanda hadn't betrayed you, would you have been happy in that marriage? The answer was more complicated than I expected. Yes, I had loved her, but looking back, I realized that there had always been cracks beneath the surface. Amanda's betrayal hadn't come out of nowhere. It had simply been the breaking point of a marriage that was already struggling. That realization was both painful and freeing. It allowed me to stop idealizing what we had and start seeing it for what it was, a flawed relationship between two people who had grown apart. For the first time, I felt like I could truly let go. With Amanda out of my life, I began reconnecting with the people I had pushed away during the worst of our marriage. Friends I hadn't seen in years welcomed me back with open arms, offering their support without judgment. My parents, who had always suspected something was wrong, were a source of quiet strength, their love a steady anchor in the storm. I also started making new connections. I joined a local gym, taking up boxing as a way to channel my emotions. The physicality of it was cathartic, a way to release the anger and frustration I still carried. I met people there who became fast friends, their energy and camaraderie reminding me that life could still be vibrant and full of possibility. One evening, while out with friends at a small bar downtown, I met someone. Her name was Rachel, and she was nothing like Amanda. Where Amanda had been polished and poised, Rachel was warm and unpretentious. She had a laugh that lit up the room, and an easy confidence that put me at ease. We talked for hours that night, sharing stories and finding common ground. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people enjoying each other's company. It was the first time since the divorce that I felt a spark of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again. Rachel and I began seeing each other casually, taking things slow. She knew about my past, about Amanda and the betrayal that had upended my life, and she respected my need for caution. There were no grand gestures, No whirlwind romance, just quiet moments of connection that felt natural and real. As our relationship grew, I found myself letting go of the pain I had carried for so long. Rachel wasn't a replacement for Amanda. She was something entirely different. She showed me that love didn't have to be complicated or painful, that it could be built on trust and mutual respect. One day, out of the blue, I received a text from Amanda. She wanted to meet, to talk about everything that had happened. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to reopen old wounds, but eventually I agreed. We met at a coffee shop, the same one where we had spent so many happy afternoons during the early days of our relationship. She looked different, tired, subdued, as though the weight of her choices had finally caught up with her. She apologized again, this time with a sincerity I hadn't seen before. She said she regretted everything, that she had realized too late what she had lost. I told her I forgave her, not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying the anger and bitterness any longer would only hurt me, and I was ready to let it go. As we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of peace. The chapter of my life that had been defined by Amanda was finally, truly over. Life after Amanda wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I continued to build my relationship with Rachel, savoring the simplicity and joy she brought into my life. I focused on my work, my hobbies, and the friendships that had carried me through the darkest times. The scars of Amanda's betrayal didn't disappear overnight, but they no longer defined me. They became a part of my story, a reminder of what I had endured and how far I had come. And as I stood on the balcony of my apartment one evening, watching the sun set over the city, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Months passed, and life began to settle into a steady rhythm. Rachel and I grew closer, our relationship deepening in ways that felt genuine and unforced. Yet, every so often, Amanda's shadow would creep into my thoughts. It wasn't longing or regret, but rather a quiet reflection on how far I had come. I found myself grateful, in an odd way, for the lessons her betrayal had taught me. It had forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, to reevaluate my priorities, and to recognize the importance of self-worth. I had allowed myself to be consumed by the illusion of our marriage, blind to the cracks that had been there all along. Moving forward, I promised myself I would never lose sight of who I was again. One afternoon, while clearing out old files on my computer, I stumbled upon a folder labeled Memories. Inside were photos and videos of Amanda and me, vacations, anniversaries, and candid moments that had once brought me joy. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the delete key. I didn't delete them. Instead, I moved the folder to an external drive and tucked it away in a drawer. Those memories were a part of my story, and while they no longer held the same meaning, I couldn't erase them entirely. They were reminders of the man I had been, the man I had grown from, and the resilience I had found in the aftermath. One crisp autumn evening, Rachel and I walked through the park, the golden leaves crunching beneath our feet. She laughed at a story I told, her hand warm in mine, and for a moment, the world felt perfectly still. It was then that I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. The proposal wasn't elaborate or flashy, just a quiet moment between the two of us, filled with sincerity and love. Rachel said yes, her smile radiant, and I felt a joy I hadn't known in years. It wasn't the kind of reckless passion I had once mistaken for love. It was steady, grounded, and deeply fulfilling. A week after Rachel and I announced our engagement, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Amanda. The envelope was plain, the handwriting familiar, and I debated whether to open it at all. Curiosity won. Inside, Amanda wrote about her regrets. She said she had heard about my engagement and was happy for me, though the words felt tinged with sadness. She admitted that losing me had been the greatest mistake of her life, and while she didn't ask for forgiveness, she wanted me to know she had grown from the experience. I read the letter twice, then folded it and placed it in the same drawer as the memories folder. It didn't evoke anger or pain, just a quiet acknowledgement that we had both moved on, though in very different ways. Rachel and I married in a small ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family. It was intimate and simple, a stark contrast to the grandiose wedding I had once shared with Amanda. But this time, the love felt real, unburdened by the weight of pretense or hidden doubts. As we exchanged vows, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for Rachel, but for the journey that had led me to her. The pain of my past had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I had found love again, and this time, I knew it was built on a foundation strong enough to endure. Even after our marriage, I occasionally wrestled with the scars of Amanda's betrayal. There were moments of doubt, fleeting fears that history might repeat itself. But Rachel, patient and understanding, never wavered. She encouraged open communication, reassuring me with her actions as much as her words. Over time, those doubts faded. Rachel's unwavering honesty and kindness helped me rebuild the trust one had thought was lost forever. With her, I learned to love without fear, to embrace vulnerability without the shadow of suspicion. It was a gift I hadn't realized I needed, and one I cherished deeply. Years later, I found myself sitting on the porch of our home, watching Rachel play with our young daughter in the yard. The laughter of my wife and child filled the air, a melody that brought tears to my eyes. The journey to this moment had been long and painful, but it had been worth it. The man I was before Amanda's betrayal felt like a distant memory. I had grown stronger, wiser, and more compassionate, not just toward others, but toward myself. Life wasn't perfect, but it was full of love, joy, and meaning. As I sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a profound sense of peace. The betrayals, the heartbreak, and the struggles of the past were no longer weights on my shoulders. They were chapters in a story that had ultimately led me to a life I could have never imagined. Rachel called my name, her voice warm and full of love, and I rose to join her and our daughter. The future stretched out before us, full of possibilities. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free, not just from Amanda's betrayal, but from the pain and anger that had once consumed me. This was my life now, and it was beautiful. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss interesting life stories, and write a comment if you like the story. See you.